Hi there and welcome. In this video I'm going to be talking about the theory behind cutting. Cutting is our foundation for all of our hairdressing services and styling. In your training you're going to be learning the 5 elementary forms. Now these include your uniform layer, your increase layer, graduation, clip and blend and your solid form. In terms of the practical elements of cutting, I'm going to be showing you elevations and projections within this video, and there will be videos of the practical aspects of each of the haircuts available to you as well online. Within your salon you're going to be trained on those practical elements, and every salon has a different way in which they will approach a haircut. So haircutting is one of those very diverse areas where there are a number of ways that you can actually achieve the same end. Within this particular video, we're going to be looking at the underpinning knowledge for all of those foundation forms. So regardless of what type of approach your salon takes and the process in which they achieve their haircuts, the actual theory behind the cutting will all be relevant and the same. So let's start with some cutting terms and definitions. When we refer to blunt and precision cutting, we are referring to cuts that are created with a regular pair of scissors. The hair is cut across a section and gives us a lovely blunt line. Now later on when I'm looking at projections we can see that further. With razor cutting, which we'll also cover today, this is created with a razor and it gives us a lovely tapered edge. In terms of texture cutting and texturizing, these are two separate skills. So let's first look at texture cutting. If we were to texture cut a form, we would normally use our twin-bladed scissors and we're pushing the hair off the head to create a form that is textured through the ends. So texture cutting is creating a form that isn't blunt and precise on the ends but still creates a shape and a form. Whereas texturizing is the process of removing hair from the head using a texturizing scissor or your blades or a razor to give us texture within the structure of a haircut. Later on we're going to be looking at texturizing and I can elaborate on that further. If we're referring to structure, we're referring to the actual shape of the haircut, and the interior shape is all of the hair that is on the inside of our structure. The perimeter shape is the area at the external or the perimeter area of our structure, so at the baseline or at the perimeter of our structure. Process is the method in which we actually achieve the shape. So every haircut will have a start and it will have an end. And in general practice we start at our shortest areas and we work methodically around or across the head to reach an end until all of the shape is created. Now every salon will have a different method and process that they use, and you'll be guided by your trainer as to where you will start and the rules in which they would like you to follow the process. So let's talk about a guideline. Now a guideline is the hair that has been cut, which will indicate which point we're going to cut the hair to. A mobile guideline will travel around the head and it will give us a structure that is even and consistent around the entire head. Whereas a stationary guideline doesn't move, and we use these guidelines to create a structure that increases in length. The projection is the angle in which we hold the hair from the head, and some people refer to projection as elevation. So when we pick up a section to cut and we project it from the head, the angle in which we lift that hair away from the head is what we refer to as the projection or the elevation. Layering is a process of lifting the hair away from the head and cutting the hair. Now what that creates is a multiple level of layers throughout the hair, so when the hair falls, it falls soft and it falls with texture. Later on we're going to talk about texturizing and texture of hair cuts and the surface texture of hair. Before we go on with projections, angles and structures, I'm just going to show you some imagery which relates to the elementary shapes. So up through here we have graduated forms. Now you'll notice that these graduated forms work from short at the perimeter area to longer through the interior area. So even this little image up here, which is distinctly shorter at the nape but fuller and longer through the fringe, uses that graduation technique. This is a graduation technique with the shorter area coming through the nape line and then still fuller and longer up through this area through here. So though they all look similar in their silhouette, they are quite different within their structure. However, they are all still graduated forms. These two are our increased layer forms. This particular one here is distinctly longer through the interior than this one, which will mean when we work that shape through, we're going to be working at a different angle to this blonde one here. So when we're actually creating this increased layer, because the hair is shorter through the internal structure and longer through the perimeter or the baseline structure, we're going to be holding that hair on an increased elevation to create this shape. This will still require an increased layer elevation to create the shape, but because it is longer through the interior than this blonde one, the angle of elevation will change. So it's still a structure that is as short as an increased layer because it is shorter through the interior and longer through the baseline or the perimeter. However, these two are very different forms. When we look at these images here, we've got two uniform layers. Uniform means the same, and when we create a uniform layer, we're creating a shape that is the same across the head. So if we look at these two images, the shorter image of the two is shorter on the top, the crown, the sides and through the nape, but all at the same length. Now we can work with structures that are predominantly one elevation. So a predominant uniform layer may be uniform all the way through but slightly graduated at the nape, for an example. Whereas this uniform layer is distinctly the same length at the nape as it is through the top area, and so therefore would be a uniform layer all the way over the head. This particular image illustrates our solid form. Now solid form is a structure that's created without elevation, so all of the hair runs to the same length. Sometimes our solid forms are a horizontal solid form, and sometimes our solid forms are diagonal forward, which means they run from a shorter shape at the back, although it's one length, to a one length shape that's longer through the front. This is an image of a clipper and blend, which stands to reason, and whilst I won't be showing you any of that today, it's important that you understand it still creates part of the 5 elementary shapes. Now that leads me to talk about projections, angles and structures. So, as we look here, I'm going to discuss the definition of an angle, just for those of you who find angles a little bit of a challenge. If you Google or you have a circular protractor, you will come to realise that angles are created with every measurement between 0 and 360 degrees on a circle. The definition of an angle is the space measured in degrees between two intersecting points or surfaces. So what that means is where these two lines intersect, that area there is the angle. Now we talk about angles because when we lift hair to create a shape, we hold the hair at a certain angle to the head, which will create the shape or the form. So the angle determines the shape of the haircut. I'm just going to take this little image down so I can talk about this image here. This is an example of the elevations and projections that we're going to talk about from these images, but when we talk about angles. So as I was saying, when we cut hair, the angle in which we project the hair from the head creates the shape or the form. If we're working at a 90-degree angle, we're working at an angle that is perpendicular to a surface. So if this is our head and we hold the hair straight up, we're holding the hair at 90 degrees to the top of the head. If I held this vertical, and let's just say, for example, it was vertical on the side of my head or vertical on the back of my head, If I wanted to hold my hair out at 90 degrees, I would be holding it straight out. Now, as we know, with a head shape, the head is curved. So working straight out from the head on the different areas of the head will require us to hold the hair at a different angle. It will still be 90 degrees. Or if you're graduating, it'll still be 45 degrees. Or if you increase layering, it will still be above 90 degrees. So just to recap, the angles we work on, we're working with graduation forms that are projected at 45 degrees. We're working on increased layer forms, which are increased or held above 90 degrees. Sometimes we hold those as far as 180 or 235. Sometimes we may only hold them at 135 degrees. It depends on the result, it depends on the look or the shape that you're creating, and it's going to very much depend on how long the hair is in its baseline versus how short the client would like their shortest layer. It's important you understand the difference between a structure graph and a projection. So just looking at these images down through here, and I'll move these so that you can see these clearly. These are in your resource book, all of these images. So looking at this page first, this is a page of projections which cover off 4 of your elementary shapes. In this particular projection where we hold the hair at 90 degrees, we're going to create a shape that is the same as the shape of the head and is the same length all over, which will give us our uniform shape. In this diagram, where the hair is held down at 0 degree projection, which means it's not lifted up, we're going to create a solid form or a one length shape. In this diagram where the hair is projected at 45 degrees, we're going to create a graduated form. And these two that are projected above 90 degrees, one all the way up to the top of the head and one out from the back of the head, are our increased layers. A structure graph is what the hair looks like if the hair all stood off the head. If we can visualize what the hair looks like if it stands off the head, it makes it a lot easier to determine how we're going to cut the shape. So just looking at these just looking at these structure graphs, we have our structure graph which is the same over the head, which is our uniform layer. That is very similar to the projection. In terms of the increased layer, you can see that the hair on the top of the head is shorter, while the hair at the nape is longer. To create that shape, we're either going to lift the hair vertical to the top of the head, or we're going to lift it out off the back of the head. In this structure graph here, we're looking at what the hair would look like if it stood out off the head for a graduated form. It's very similar to our solid form. And to explain how we would determine the difference, we have to decide what the hair is doing through the crest line, which is the widest part of the head, through here. When we graduate, we're projecting the hair at 45 degrees, and so the hair at the crest line is going to be shorter than the hair on a one length look or a solid form. So therefore the structure graph will be long through the top in both images, but as you work through your crest line, the graduated form will decrease, whereas the length at the crest line on your solid form is almost the same length as the hair on the top. These images are also available to you in your resource book. So the first projection I'm going to be talking about today is your uniform projection, which, as you already know, is going to be projected at 90 degrees to the shape of the head. So I've just scaled out a central area on this mannequin to show you. So we need to project the hair at 90 degrees to the shape of the head, and if we hold the comb on the head first and then follow our comb with our fingers to the determined length, be able to create a shape that is the same shape as the head at 90 degrees. Now we're going to cut this section directly across our mesh at the same angle as the shape of the head. So just using the first centimetre of your blade, You'll cut the hair and create a nice uniform shape. As we work up the head, the shape of the head changes and it's curved. So as we project the head from this, we've already cut this area here, and we're going to use the hair from the nape line as a mobile guideline to indicate where we will cut the hair to in the next section. So as I scale out my section and I bring the hair out from the head at 90 degrees, my guideline from below will tell me where to cut the hair at 90 degrees to the head. Now, because the head is curved, between the two areas, you'll create a corner where the two angles meet, and that little corner will need to be rounded. So you see that little corner through there? I'll just show you more. So we go around and around. So that needs to be smoothed off so that we're creating a shape that is following the head in the same curve. As I move up the head, I'm going to take my guideline from here, projecting the hair at 90 degrees to the head. So I hold my comb on the head and I follow my comb with my fingers out to my guideline, and using the first centimetre of my blade, take the hair off. So creating a nice uniform shape on the crown. Again, because the head curves, I'm going to collect the hair from both areas, and you'll see that I've got this little point here, just taking that little corner off so that the shape is curving like the head. So you'll notice that that's curving round. As I come up through the top of my head, I'm taking some guideline from the crown, and on the top of the head I'm going to be working at 90 degrees. So lifting that up to my guideline, I'm cutting across at 90 degrees. And then I will hold my hair out so that my shape curves, and you can see my little point. I'm going to curve, I'm going to round that corner off so that I don't have a sharp corner, so the shape's curving. Taking my mobile guideline with me, I'm going to shape my uniform layer through the front of the head. And remember that because the head slopes away, we ought to be shaping the hair to the head. So with my comb flat on the head, I collect the hair, following my comb with my fingers, I can come out to my guideline and cut the shape at 90 degrees to the head on my guideline. Excellent. You can see that this is projected the same shape as the head. Before we get started with our graduated shape, I'm just going to remind you how we determine 45 degrees and 22.5 degrees. The reason we have variation with our graduation shape in terms of between 22.5 and 45 degrees is because, technically speaking, a graduated shape works from short to long on the interior. It's gradually worked from a short to a long point. When we have the head shape being curved, geometrically speaking, the hair at this area is only going to be angled at 22.5, whilst the hair at this area will be angled at 45 degrees. Now, if we think about our angles, and we think about this as an illustration of our vertical section, when we're lifting the hair out at 45 degrees, we're halfway between 90 degrees and 0. So if you can remember your elevation, your projection at 90 degrees is straight out from the head. If you're dropping your hand halfway down, you're creating a 45-degree angle. Now, something that can be quite useful for a stylist is to take a clear plastic square and fold it in half horizontally, in half vertically, and in half diagonally, and then draw in your lines. So if you were to take a vertical section, it will indicate your 90-degree angle, your 45-degree angle. You can draw your 22.5 degrees on, and you can draw all of your increased elevations on the head as well, on the plastic as well. Then, to practice being able to instinctively select your sections at the right elevation, you can place your celestial axis on the head and hold the hair at the desired angle. So for example, if I wanted to project this piece of hair at 90 degrees to the head, I could hold my celestial axis on the head and then just line it up with the 90-degree angle on my celestial axis. So a celestial axis can be used at a vertical placement and at a horizontal placement on top of the head, so you can learn to instinctively be able to assess which angle you're holding the hair on. So let's move on to our graduated projection. I'm going to scale a section at the nape, and I'm going to project that at 45 degrees to the head. So I'm coming down at 45 degrees, and I'm going to cut my shape at 45 degrees. Creating a nice clean graduation from short to long. As we work up through the occipital area, projecting the hair at 45 degrees from the top of our occipital area, we're using our guideline from the nape area to indicate where we're going to cut the hair to, and we're projecting the hair and graduating that in there. So a nice clean form which will blend nicely through to our nape area. When we take our shape up through our crown area, projecting the hair at 45 degrees, this would be 90, so this is 45, coming out onto our graduated form, following our guideline and shaping the hair at 45 degrees. Checking that blends through and checking that that blends through. Now let's look at our increased layer projection. If we have a client that presents with long hair that wants to preserve the length at the baseline or the perimeter, however would like to have some shorter layers through the interior, we need to use an increased layer projection. What this means is that the hair is taken in sections and worked from the shortest area to the longest area, and we would extend the hair up off the top of the head, lifting the hair as we go. We're going to project this section up to the top of the head and create our shape. Now what is important is for you to understand how you determine the length on the top versus the length at the baseline. So that would come in your consultation with your client. It would be determined by what the client would like in terms of where she would like her shortest layer to sit. In order to preserve the length at the baseline while creating layers in the interior, we need to lift the hair right up. So you can see that I'm actually stretching this hair all the way up to the top of the head, and the projection for this particular shape would be up through to there. Now we need to have enough length to reach to the top of the head to be able to use this particular elevation. And this length needs to be able to reach the length of your layer through the top. So during your consultation, you'll ask your client how long she would like her shortest layer, and she will indicate, or you will consult with her and decide how long she wants to leave her length. So taking you through that project, we always work in small manageable pieces, and I'm going to extend the hair up to our shortest layer is going to be that level. As we work down through our section, down through our occipital, lifting that hair from the occipital up to the top of the head as well, collecting that up, we can see our guideline, and we're going to trim our shape. As we work our way down through our nape area, remember that we're preserving our length, so we're going to lift that hair all the way up to the top. And on our guideline, we've just got to trim our length. Now when that falls down, you have created a layer that is consistent and flows right the way through the length of the head, but preserves your length at your baseline or perimeter. So if the client's baseline didn't reach to the top of the head, to accommodate the length of the layers, and was falling away as you lifted it up, like these ones are, then you would elevate or project the hair still above 90, but you would project it out off the back of the head. So I'm going to take you through that projection as well. So let's just, for example, determine that the client has said she would like her layer to start mid-cheek line. That means that we're going to be removing about that much off the top area. However, when we pull this up, it won't reach. It doesn't reach the top. So the projection changes to the angle in which you hold that hair. So just to clarify that, if you take the hair that is the shortest hair at the baseline, and project that out, and take your hair from the top according to your consultation, taking your 1.5 centimeters off the top, and hold your hand on the angle that it forms between the 2 points. You will then be able to use this projection. So if you can see that in focus, this projection here. Now this is available to you in your resource book, but this projection coming out of the back of the head is the projection that you would use when the length won't reach the top. So I'll just take you through that. So scaling through our crown area first and projecting the hair out at the angle we had determined earlier. Knowing we're going to be taking 1.5 centimeters off the top of the hair, we're going to shape our section across our hair mesh. As we scale down through the occipital, we're lifting the hair nice and clean. This hair just sits in your hand. So we can see our guideline, and holding the comb on the same angle as the guideline tells us what angle we're going to cut the hair on. So you'll notice that my fingers are pushed up hard under my comb and my guideline is sitting in this end of my comb. So just to clarify that, I'll take that up again. So there's my guideline on the left, and now it's sitting in my comb, and now I'm holding my fingers at the same angle as my guideline. So I can come in knowing confidently that I'm going to be blending my hair through from my occipital to my crown. And now just working our hair up from the nape, lifting the hair up, remembering the angle that we've been working on. Follow our comb to our guideline so we can see our guideline, trimming our hair off on our guideline, and we have a nice consistent shape through from the nape up through to the crown. So just to recap, we use this projection coming out from the back of the head as an increased layer for when we're wanting to maintain our length at the perimeter or the baseline whilst creating layers through the interior. So now I'm going to take you through a solid form projection, remembering that our solid form is projected at 0 degrees, which means we're not lifting the hair out. We're holding the hair at natural fall down at 0 degrees. We can create a shape that is either horizontal or diagonal, depending on the design requirements. However, the hair for a solid form has no layering and is not projected from the head. So, if we let the hair fall at natural fall, and we slide our fingers in behind and just gather the hair, and then we're going to, using the tips of our scissors, remove the length. Creating a horizontal form. Natural fall, collect the hair, holding it at 0 degree projection and creating a horizontal line. So this is your solid form. You would generally work your way up in just small horizontal sections if you're working in a horizontal form. If you're working in a diagonal form, you may use diagonal sections. One more just to illustrate. Remember, 0 degree projection, letting the hair fall at natural fall, hand behind, comb the hair. There's your guideline. You come in with the first centimetre of your blades and create a nice horizontal form. I'm just going to take you through some razor cutting techniques. A razor is used to create a tapered finish and a light finish, which will help hair to move. There are 3 factors that impact on the result of your razor cutting. So the 3 factors are the angle you hold the razor on the mesh, the pressure you place on the razor at the time you're stroking through your razor, and the length of your stroke. So as I go through our razoring on our mannequin, I'm going to talk my way through those areas. The 4 methods I'm going to be showing you today are sweeping, peeling, slicing and slithering. So sweeping is a razor cutting technique that is used in the interior structure of the hair, and it is used with long sweeping action, as you can see through here, taking the hair off in a tapered form on your guide. As you work through, you'll see your guideline, but you'll sweep gently and you'll notice my blade is really flat on the mesh, so that way I'm going to be creating maximum texture while maintaining my length. So I'm just graduating the shape at this point in time, and you'll notice that I've actually clipper cut my underneath areas just for the sake of time today. Cross-checking as you go. Make sure that you're still creating a nice consistent form. See your guideline. Let your guideline travel through your fingers, and as you do that you can sweep into your section and create your shape. So this technique is called a sweeping technique. Excellent. Now one of the slicing techniques I use is to come from underneath. So I will come from my shortest point of my clippering and I will just slice upwards and over in an arc. Now what that does, it scallops the hair into a shape that forces the hair inways. So you can see you're getting that really nice texture, but you're also getting that lovely fall. So this way you're bringing your razor vertically upwards and you're just slicing in an upward motion just to bring your shape through from the clippering, blend through in a scalloping motion like so. Now we can also slice horizontally, and that will create a really strong finish to our shape. So we would take our shape and at the baseline, holding our razor perpendicular to our mesh, firmly slice down through. Now if you have a look, you'll notice that that is a lot stronger than my finish so far through here. So for a stronger finish to your shape, hold the razor on perpendicular and slice down through the hair. Hold the razor on perpendicular and slice down through the hair. Now that's a slicing technique, and you can use that either from underneath or from above. So if you come from above, you're slicing down. When you're coming from underneath, as I showed you earlier, you're holding the razor perpendicular and you're slicing up and over. Working my way through, I'm bringing my hair back to a stationary guideline. And using my sweeping technique, removing the hair. You'll notice that I'm coming in quite a way down my mesh, and because my blade is flat, it's just taking out tiny amounts of hair as I work my way out to my finished structure. So I'm creating an internal texture as I come out to the edge of my structure to create my shape. Laying my blade on nice and flat, giving me that lovely fine texture that you can see popping up through there. And then as I come to the edge of my guideline, I can take the hair off on my guideline, but at the same time as I'm creating a structure, I've created texture on the internal area. Remember, razor cutting gives the hair the ability to move. And that is because we're not working on a solid scissor cut, and we're creating all that really lovely texture within our form. Through this area is what I want to be my perceived shortest point. I'm going to come around and I'm just going to slither through there to create the shorter area and underneath. Now I want my longer hair to fall over top of that, so I'm going to go back to my slicing from in underneath and just take some of the texture out from underneath. So that's just going to give me that lovely veil. And this isn't a lesson in cutting, this is just a lesson in razoring and using your different techniques. I'm going back to using a slicing technique first. A slithering technique. So just slithering, slithering is when you hold the razor vertical on your section. So it's across your section. And you're slithering, just taking the tiniest little pieces of hair to give you an angle and to give us the shorter hair. Whilst, can you see that shape there? So you can see that I've come from my shortest point down really, really sharply, and then I'm going to use my slicing from underneath just to come up and take away some of the bulk. Starting to get the shape going now. On the perimeter, remember I used the vertical slicing, and that's to create a stronger form. Excellent. Before I move to the other side, I'm just going to go through my interior here. I just need to take this guideline across, and it's just a little bit long through there. So I want to show you the peeling technique. We use that generally on the tops of the head, and it's using your razor as you would a vegetable peeler or a potato peeler. So you can see that from my shortest point through, I need to just take that length off on my guideline. So coming in with my blade on my fingers and pushing the hair against the blade, you're just turning your blade over to create a texture but a distinct form. And this method is called peeling. Coming up through the top there. This just saves you trying to get in underneath the hair cut when you're trying to do this with your sweeping. So this particular method of razoring is quite popular with the top area of the head, or quite useful on the top area of the head to create your form at the same time you have texture. Just checking that that's blending into my form. Just checking that's blending in. Excellent. So just finishing off this side now. Just going to finish my perimeter to a nice strong ridge line through this area using my slicing technique. Again, the degree of taper on your razoring is influenced by the amount of pressure on your razor, the length of your stroke, and the angle of the razor on the section. So the flatter you hold your razor, the more taper you're going to get, and the more vertical you hold your razor, the stronger your finish is going to be. So try to incorporate a bit of a mix so that you can see the variations between the techniques and I'll have to dry this mannequin so you can see it truly. So now that we've finished our razor cutting, I'm going to take you through texturizing. Now texturizing is used to either remove bulk or direct the hair. Short hair directs long hair, and we use our texturizing with short hair to either create texture and light shapes or to force hair to do what we want it to do. So we can create movement in the hair. We can also create volume or force the hair in. So if we want to create volume, we're going to use underlying texture. If we want to force the hair in, we use overlying texture. If you refer to your resource, there's some information about those techniques in your resource. The tools that we use for texturizing range from our texturizing scissors, which come in a large variety of types and structures. Some of them are single bladed like these ones, some of them are double bladed. All texturizers serve a purpose and give a different result. We also use our regular blades for texturizing, and when we use our regular blades we can create a similar texture to razoring that is light and tapered. We also use a razor for texturizing. Now this can be used to create texture within the structure of a haircut or create texture around a perimeter. And we know that razoring tapers the hair. So just to get started on how you use your texturizers correctly, if I was to remove bulk from a heavy area such as this area here, and I elevated the hair to remove the bulk from the mid-lengths and ends, we use our texturizers on a 45-degree across our section. So if you see our sections running this way, rather than taking our scissors horizontally across, use them on a 45-degree. That way you will get a taper in your texture as opposed to a rigid horizontal line. So just going over that again, I'll select another section. If I want to create texture and lighten up my mid-lengths and ends, on a 45-degree to my mesh and taking the section through. So we've got a nice light texture but no distinct horizontal lines caused by our texturizers. If I wanted to use texture to create volume, I would place that texture underneath. Now if we have a style that has inactive surface texture, which means it's smooth, we wouldn't want to place short texture on the top area because it's going to pop through our surface texture, our smooth surface texture. If we wanted to create volume and an active texture, we could place short texture in on the top of the head. So you need to be careful where you place your texture and what surface texture you're wanting to head towards before you determine or decide where you're going to put your texture. To create volume with your texture, we are generally working at the scalp. So, if we wanted to create volume through this area, we would create an area of short hair to support the long hair. Now that could range from 1 centimetre to anything up to 4 or 5 centimetres. So we could come in and using my double blades, going through there and just chipping out some texture and working my way across the section out to the mid-lengths. From the roots to the mid-lengths is where you create your volume. So you can see those lovely little soft short pieces of hair, they're going to serve to support that longer hair. So when we use underlying texture, we're using that texture to support the long hair. And remember, to create volume, the texture must be within the root area and the mid-lengths in this area here. If I wanted to create texture to force my hair inward, so if you have a wee look at this area here, this is just a little bit round through here. So if I wanted to force that in, I would place my texture over top. And I can use my blades or a razor, or I can use my texturizers. So let's have a look and see how that would work with texturizers. Coming in over top with your texturizers, you're going to come on a 45-degree angle to the hair section and you're going to push downward. So you would work down, down, down. So again, on the 45-degree angle, holding onto it on the 45-degree angle, pushing down, down, down. You'll now notice that that's sitting in flatter than it was before. So it's just lost that really, really round area through this lower area here. So texturizing serves to create those lovely soft wispy edges. On an area where you have a ridge line, where you may have intentionally created a ridge line, in this hairstyle I have a ridge line, but I've created it with my razor. So it is not really, really solid as it would be if I went through there and cut that with my double blades. If I wanted to soften that further, I can come up from underneath on a 45-degree angle and using my texturizers create texture through that ridge line, and that will just soften that ridge line even further so that it pushes it in. Because we're putting the texture over top, it's now pushing that inward so that it's sitting nice and snug through there. So remember, when we put texture underneath, we're lifting the hair up or pushing the hair up. When we place texture over top, we're pushing hair in. If we want volume, we need to use our texturizing techniques between the scalp and the mid-lengths. If we want to lighten an area that is heavy within a haircut structure, we're creating texture through our mid-lengths and ends. The last technique I want to show you is a slithering technique that we use around the facial shaping on our long hair. So this is our lovely increased layer mannequin, and I have already produced the result that we're looking for today by slithering through from my shortest point down through my longest point. I'm just going to show you that through this side. So taking a diagonal section, slithering is when we take a vertical section and we use our razor acrossways to that section and flat. So lifting my section upwards and forward, I'm going to be working from my shortest point to my longest point. Now remember, I'm working across my section and vertical. So coming through and lifting that up, you can see how I'm creating a shorter area down through to my longer area here. So just going over that again, lifting the hair vertically, starting from your shortest point behind your hand, and you're just slithering across the weft to create this lovely soft texture. Diagonal section, bringing your length forward. Lifting your hair up, coming in behind your hand, across your section, and sliding through. So it's very hard for you to see that, I'm sure, because my arm's in the way. That's better. If I've turned that way, you'll be able to see. So lifting the hair upwards and coming in behind your hand with your razor, you're sliding down across your vertical section and just slithering that hair really, really nicely to produce this really lovely framing shape around her face. Coming down into your length. Diagonal section. Elevating the hair up, coming in behind your hand and just slicing through. As you lift the hair up, the more you elevate the hair, so I'm not even going to even touch that, I'm just going to turn her around. The more you elevate the hair, the more the softer your hair will fall once you've cut through the hair. So you'll see that you've got that really lovely shaping down into your length through the perimeter. Last section. Sometimes when you come to this last area, there's very little that comes off. Again, I'll turn her around so that you can see as I cut this. Elevating the hair forward and up, using your blade on a vertical and slithering through as you lift your hand without touching it, creating that lovely soft texture. When you're working on the other side, it pays to stand on the left and draw the hair up and forward. So just to show you without taking any of the hair off, taking my section up and forward, taking my section up and forward, I'm just slicing, as I lift the hair, I'm just slicing through my section like so. So your razor stays vertical and you're coming around and just slithering through to give you that lovely soft shaping around the face. I'm now going to take you through some clippering techniques. I'm just going to be showing you very simply how to use a clipper and how to blend from a shorter area to a longer area. Now I've already clipped it in underneath this mannequin here. She's already clipped it off to a number 3 through there. Often we work with wet hair. Depending on the nature of the shape and depending on how long the hair is that you're working with, you'll create your shape according to procedure. So generally we would start at the shortest area. You should always hold your clipper head as you turn it on, making sure that you've oiled your clippers before you start your haircut. They have a super taper on many of the brands, so you can actually, rather than using guards, you can create a fade or a taper using your super taper. Today I'm just going to be clippering over comb. I'm going to come in and blend across my comb to create some clippering. So, clippering is just another tool that we use to create a short hairstyle. What's important to know is when you are clippering that once you've worked horizontally to take your length off, if you work diagonally through your shape, turn it round, it might be easier, you'll create a really nice smooth blend. So working diagonally through here, I'm using my comb to guide me through the process and getting a really nice blend between my short area and my longer area. Letting my next section down. Many sets of clippers have the guards, and a lot of salons use the guards, and that's perfectly acceptable. So starting from my shortest area at the back, I'm coming in underneath to take my length off over my comb, lifting the hair up as I go, then working diagonally. So sometimes we use wider combs for our barbering and sometimes we use smaller combs. It is a matter of preference, but if we're using a wider comb, we have a bigger platform to take the clipper head across. So when we're clippering over a comb, we can use a wide barber's comb to work through with our clippers. So as we come across our comb with our clippers, we're just sweeping across to take the hair off. We're wanting to create a nice blend as we work on through up into our longer area. So clipper cuts are not just restricted to our male styles. We can use them in our fashion work. Adjusting the taper through there just to get in nice and close in that lower area. So just coming up and clipping over my comb, bringing the hair forward. The more you lift, the more of a taper you'll get on the end of your clippering. So getting that really nice blend through there. turn her around. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually blending now across into my long area. So having come from short through to my haircut, I'm blending on through now to where I had my stationary guideline to create my length in the front. So again, we're just looking at technique at this point rather than necessarily me taking you through a fashion haircut. It's just a bit of a bonus that you might see some new techniques. Bringing that into the haircut and leading this back to the haircut. So I'm using my clippers to cut through the hair, and you'll see that I'm still getting that lovely softness because I'm lifting the hair. So as I work through this section again, so I'm coming across my section, lifting the hair up as I work, so that when I comb that down, I've got a nice flow and a nice blend that's blending round into such a distinctively longer length. So the key when you're working with clippers from a short shape to a long shape is to lift the hair up. And even as we progressively come around the hair, you can see that we don't have that really strong line. The clippering blends through nice and smooth and nice and velvety. One of the key things to create a lovely velvety finish is to come across your section after you've taken your length off, to come through your section diagonally, and that way you'll create a really nice soft finish to your form. Even when we have such a distinct variation from short, as you can see here, coming into my length, which is clearly longer, we've got a lovely blend. You haven't got that really big ridge line. As that comes across through there, it blends really, really subtly and really softly. So regardless of whether the wind blows that back to there is still that lovely soft blend that comes through into my length on this side. It is important to understand that your clippering must blend smoothly as opposed to having ridges or lines throughout the clipper area. What we don't want with our clipper and blending is haircuts that aren't velvety smooth. We want them to be nice and velvety smooth, coming from the shortest area up into the longest area and then blending on round into our hair cut. So in this instance I've blended it round into my razor cut, and I've got a really nice flow through there and preserving this length. So today we've looked at the theory behind cutting. I have talked about the key terms that we use within cutting. I've talked about structures, and I've also shown you the projections of the shapes that we're working on. I have, in practical sense, we've gone over the projections for each of the elementary shapes, your uniform layer, your increase layer, graduation. We've looked at some clippering, we've looked at some razor techniques, and we have looked at the forms and shapes that we would expect to see with these elementary techniques. Take these skills, practice them, work on them, and develop into amazing stylists.